The Razee Saga. Part 8. The Infinite War. The Bastion docks were alive with light. Earth's orbital ring burned like a constellation unto itself. A crown of steel wrapped in golden fire as welders, drones, and shipwrights labored across projects so vast that entire fleets could hide within their shadows. Thousands of vessels circled like insects around giants, their hulls small, their engines dwarfed by the colossal silhouettes rising from the void. At the heart of it all, shadow. Even incomplete, it dwarfed everything the Alliance had ever built. 15 times the mass of the Iron Bastion, 10 times the length of the Razee II, its frame stretched like a mountain suspended against the stars. Plates of obsidian steel locked into place along its flanks, dark alloy shimmering faint arcs of resonance as if the hull itself breathed. Its layered shields pulsed in test intervals, golden and blue lattices flashing outward before fading, then repeating again, stronger each cycle. Along its spine, weapon systems of impossible scale hung dormant. Some were known: massive rail cannons longer than carriers, torpedo silos that could erase fleets. But others were locked in secrecy, their housings sealed, their cores humming with Sentinel-forged power no engineer outside the Illyrians fully understood. And within its heart, cloaked beneath thousands of meters of armor, a full drive unlike any other. A blink core tuned not just to vanish and reappear but to skip fractions of time itself. Rumors whispered that Shadow could cross an entire system before an enemy knew it had moved. If the Razee II was a blade, Shadow was a weapon beyond definition. A sword forged not for duels but for gods. And yet, beside it, something greater still took shape. Sunfire. Where Shadow stretched like a spear across the void, Sunfire was vast, round, monumental. Its frame already dwarfed Earth itself, a cradle of alloy and resonance shields so immense that even Bastion Dock's titanic arms strained to hold its shape. It was no warship. No guns bristled from its sides. No hangars disgorged fighters. Instead, entire landscapes spread across its interior hulls, biospheres already seeded with rivers, soil, and forests. Arcologies gleamed under false suns, entire cityscapes built within its shell. It was the last arc. Twice the size of the shield world, its hull layered with dampeners tuned to resist the Watcher's pull, its resonance fields folding back upon themselves until no shadow could pierce its depths. It was designed to hold millions. Not just from Earth, but from Cryion, Tartus, Savran, Yria. Every world with a banner in the Alliance would have a place within its walls. Entire cultures, entire species, preserved in a fortress that could move, cloak, and survive where no planet could. Safe haven. A beginning. A contingency against the infinite. But as massive as it was, it remained incomplete. Half its hull unsealed, its interior still raw framework. Engines unlit. Life support only a skeleton of what it must be. The debates had already begun. In the war dome of the Razee II, the Alliance Council gathered once more. Holograms of the two giants filled the chamber, Shadow gleaming black and gold, Sunfire glowing faint silver in the dark. Tartans thundered for the sword. Shadow must be completed first. To fight shadows, one needed fire, not a haven. Savran whispered their agreement, their serpentine voices warning that arcs were only useful if there was still a war to flee. The Illyrians countered with calm steel. Sunfire was the only true answer to the infinite. Not conquest. Not defiance. Survival. Preservation. Even if every fleet burned, life would endure. Cryion remained silent, their stone-eyed war masters offering no words, only wait. And through it all, Admiral Buck Rivers listened. The council looked to him at last. The banners of every world turned toward the man who had led fleets through silence, traps, and fire. He stepped forward, the weight of the void in his stance, his voice unyielding. Both. The word cut through the chamber like a blade. Shadow would rise as the Alliance's sword. Sunfire would endure as the Alliance's last hope. Neither would wait for the other. Both would be brought to life no matter the cost. No banners lowered in dissent. Even the Tartans and Illyrians bowed their heads, their fury and patience tempered by the Admiral's word. Above Earth, the giants continued to rise. One to strike, one to endure. And in the shadows beyond sight, the infinite stirred. 4 months, the Watchers had hovered in shadows, drifting at the edges of systems, their ships vast and immovable. They had tested colonies, pressed defenses, clipped at convoys, but never committed. Not fully. Not until now. It began at Oralis, a hub of trade at the rim, its orbit lined with markets and docks, its surface alive with millions who bartered under banners of neutrality. Oralis was no fortress, no bastion, no prize of war. It was a crossroad, a place where Federation remnants, Alliance merchants, and unaffiliated worlds could meet without fear. Its people believed their neutrality, their insignificance, made them safe. They were wrong. The shadows fell without warning. One moment, the system's skies were filled with traffic. Convoys climbing into orbit, freighters flashing their beacons, patrols drifting along charted paths. The next, light bent across the stars and obsidian silhouettes appeared. A dozen watcher ships, each the size of moons, drifted into orbit without engines, without fire, without sound. The void broke. Violet lances cut across the system, erasing patrol fleets in a single breath. Stations bent inward, their shields unraveling as if made of cloth. Orbital rings crumbled into fire. The docks, the convoys, the habitats, all silenced in bursts of brilliance that burned without flame. Oralis screamed. Cities on the surface flared white as beams cut through them, erasing blocks at a time. Millions turned to ash in moments, their cries never reaching the stars. The neutral hub became a grave in less than an hour. And then the shadows took the survivors. The Watchers pulled them from the wreckage. Not corpses, not rubble, but people. Entire blocks of screaming men, women, children, lifted from the world below into silence. No one knew where. No one saw them again. When the fire ended, Oralis was nothing. Its orbit a shattered ring of wreckage, its surface a smoking scar, its people gone. Not conquered, not enslaved, erased. The Infinite had spoken. Across the Alliance, alarms flared. Reports streamed in, fragmented but undeniable. Oralis was gone. Not a test, not a strike meant to cripple. Total annihilation. In the war dome of the Razee II, Buck Rivers stood in silence as the images replayed. The Council's voices howled around him, Tartans roaring for immediate retaliation, Savran whispering of opportunity to strike, Illyrians pale with warning that Sunfire must accelerate before the same fate struck core worlds. Cryion remained silent, but their eyes burned with fury. Rivers' voice cut through them all. The silent war is over. The chamber stilled. Every banner turned. This is the infinite war. Stephen's pale eyes glowed faintly at his side. His voice was quiet, trembling. And this was only their first step. The council chamber burned with light, the holographic replay of Oralis flickering across its heart. Ash where cities had stood. A ring of wreckage where trade had flowed. Violet arcs stretching like wounds across the system, fading into silence. Banners roared at once. The Tartans struck first, their voices thunder, fists slamming alloy tables. Strike back. Take fleets. Take bastions. Burn the infinite before they come again. Savran voices hissed sharp, agreeing that hesitation was death, that predators smelled fear in silence. The Illyrians countered with calm, but even their silver tones cracked under the weight of loss. Sunfire must be completed. Not tomorrow, not later. No. We must secure the survival of our people before more Oralis are erased. Cryion remained silent, their stone-eyed masters saying nothing, their silence heavier than any roar. Their stillness was judgment, of the Watchers, of the Council, of themselves. Through it all, Buck Rivers did not move. The war dome of the Razee II was filled with noise, rage, panic, fear, resolve. But he stood at its center, his arms folded, his jaw set, his eyes locked on the burning scar of Oralis. When he spoke, the banners fell silent. This is not the Federation. This is not mercenaries or proxies or even shadows testing our resolve. This is war. His words cut like steel. If we scatter our fleets, if we hoard our resources, if we build for only survival, we die. The Watchers will not leave havens untouched. They will not let Sunfire drift in silence. They will come for us whether we raise a sword or not. His hand swept across the projection, through the wreckage of Oralis, through the scarred surface. The only way forward is together. Every fleet, every forge, every banner. He turned, his eyes cutting to each world in turn. Tartus, Savran, Cryion, Yria, Earth. Both Shadow and Sunfire will be completed. Bastion stations reinforced. walking bastions deployed to every homeworld. And fleets will not scatter. They will stand together, strike together, endure together. No banner lowered. No voice dared dissent. Even the Tartans, their fury hot as fire, lowered their fists in assent. The Illyrians bowed their heads, silver eyes dimming in agreement. Cryion inclined their stone-like chins. The council was unified. Stephen's pale eyes glowed faintly at River's side, his voice a whisper. They will test again. Rivers did not flinch. Then we'll be ready. The command had gone out. Across the stars, the Alliance stirred. Bastion docks that had once glowed with slow labor now roared with fire, their arms building not only Shadow and Sunfire, but warships of every class at a pace that bent the limits of industry. Orbital rings lit the skies above Cryion, Tartus, Savran, and Yria, each pouring steel and resonance into new hulls. And above every homeworld, the walking bastions moved. Their colossal frames glided into orbit, each one a fortress wrapped in shields and weapons, each one an anchor against the infinite. Tartus received too, their crimson banners wrapped around the behemoths like cloaks. Savran hissed in satisfaction as their serpentine towers lit with defensive arrays. Cryon's stony silence masked approval as the great machines locked into place above their mountains. Yria bowed their silver heads, whispering blessings as golden towers shimmered in their skies. For the first time in history, every Alliance homeworld had an immortal guardian. At Sentinel, the great world blazed with fire as its time-freeze weapon was rearmed. The planet's forges labored day and night, repairing the fleets that had bled in the first infinite strike. Engineers from every banner walked its golden towers, Illyrian scholars decoding rune after rune, Cryion artisans bending alloys older than their species into new shields, Tartans and Savran competing to see who could raise the largest warframe. The shield world echoed with the same. Its hidden weapon, the titanic vessel formed of 24 ancient hulls, remained cloaked, untouched, untested, still cradled in golden lattice. But its defenses flared brighter, its towers humming, its halo net expanding further each cycle. No longer silent, no longer waiting. And in orbit of Earth, the giants rose higher. Shadow gleamed black and gold, her weapon cores nearly ready, her shields layering in test after test until the void around her shimmered. Crews swarmed her decks, marines trained in her holds, engineers whispered of power no ship had ever held. Sunfire stretched like a continent, its biospheres blooming under false suns. Families from every world had already been chosen, seeded into its halls to test life support systems, to walk forests that would one day be the last of their kind. Its engines still slept, but its dampeners pulsed faintly, cloaking its presence even from watcher gaze. In the war dome of the Razee II, Buck Rivers watched the reports with steady eyes. Holograms bloomed before him. Walking bastions in orbit, fleets in formation, factories glowing across the Alliance. General Tudor reported Marine regiments tripled in size. Resonance rifles in every hand, Sentinel training woven into drills. Tartans roared with eagerness, demanding to test their claws on infinite flesh. Savran hissed in agreement. Cryion stood silent, their nods wait enough. Illyrians whispered patience, warning the infinite would not wait long. Stephen sat quiet at River's side, his pale eyes glowing faint. His whisper cut through the noise. They see us preparing. They want us afraid. They want us scattered. River's jaw tightened, his voice low, iron. Then we'll show them we're neither. The council bowed in unity, banners lowered not in dissent but in resolve. The silent war was over. The infinite war had begun. And the Alliance was ready to endure it. The order went out. Every Alliance fleet, from Tartus, Savran, Cryion, Yria, and Earth, was commanded to converge on Sentinel and the Shield World. The Council did not hesitate. They understood as Rivers did. These two planets were more than strongholds. They were the spine of the Alliance, the forges of survival, the vaults of every weapon that might stand against the infinite. Earth kept 300 warships in orbit of Bastion Dock, a shield of steel around Shadow and Sunfire as their colossal frames neared completion. Every other hull, every bastion station, every carrier and Titan surged toward the twin worlds where Fire and Shadow would soon meet. Sentinel loomed vast and golden as the fleets arrived. Its towers gleamed brighter than stars, its planetary cannons humming, its time-freeze weapon pulsing faint arcs into the void. The shield world glowed the same, cloaked weapon hushed beneath its golden shield, halo nets stretching into arcs that bent space. The Alliance assembled. Hundreds of warships took formation in concentric rings around both worlds. Titans aligned broadside, destroyers fanned in layered arcs, carriers scattered wings of fighters that lit the void in disciplined patrols. Walking bastions locked into place like pillars, their shields expanding outward until Sentinel and the shield world shone behind walls of fire. It was the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen. And still Rivers knew it might not be enough. The void shifted. Stars bent. Watcher ships appeared in silence, drifting into orbit as though they had always been there. A dozen at first, vast as moons, their violet arcs shimmering faint against the black. Then 24, then more. 50, 60, 70. An entire armada of the infinite, blotting out the void with obsidian silhouettes. No threats. No warnings. No demands. Only silence. Then the lances fired. Sentinel's shields flared as beams cut across the system, slamming into golden barriers with the weight of stars. Walking bastions staggered under the impact, their shields bending, straining, then holding. The halo net shimmered, absorbing violet fire and bending it back into arcs that cracked against Watcher hulls. Alliance fleets roared in response. Titans unleashed volleys of plasma that tore into the void. Destroyers swarmed forward in arcs of fire. Fighters screamed through dogfights as they weaved between violet beams. The Shepherd's resonance cannons lit in pulses of blue-white, splitting a Watcher ship into molten shards. The Aegis II spread her shields, bending fire and reflecting it until Watcher hulls cracked apart. The Isabella II shimmered, flickering in and out of cloak as she slid behind infinite ships, striking engines and fading before fire could return. The Razee II led the charge. Her broadside lit the void like dawn, cannons thundering, bombers flooding from her bays, Marines deployed to bastion stations to reinforce boarding defenses. She was the heart of the fleet, and her fire tore through shadows. But still the infinite pressed. Every ship destroyed was replaced by another drifting from the void. Every lance bent aside was followed by another. The battle became a storm, endless waves of violet arcs hammering golden shields until even Sentinel's barriers strained. Then the planet awoke. Stephen stood in Sentinel's golden towers, his hands pressed against runes older than memory. His pale eyes glowed brighter than suns as he whispered words none could hear. Sentinel's core pulsed. Time froze. Every Watcher ship in orbit stopped. Their beams halted mid-flight, lances of violet light hanging motionless across the void. Fighters froze mid-dogfight, missiles locked in arcs that never reached their marks. Silence fell heavier than fire. The Alliance moved. Cannons thundered. Fleets tore frozen silhouettes apart, carving through ships that could not dodge, shields that could not bend. The Razee II's broadside gutted a Titan in 3 volleys. The Shepherd split 2 more into molten ruin. Titans advanced in walls of fire, carving obsidian ships into wreckage as frozen seconds stretched into minutes. When Sentinel released time, half the Watcher fleet was gone. But victory was not without cost. Walking bastions burned. Carriers drifted in ruin. Thousands of fighters were lost. Tens of thousands of crew gone, their ships shattered even as the infinite retreated. Sentinel held. The shield world stood. The Alliance survived. But the void was littered with wreckage, and the dead would be counted for days. In the war dome of the Razee II, Rivers stood silent, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes on the debris drifting across the void. Stephen's whisper carried faint at his side. This was only their first strike. Rivers' jaw tightened. His voice was iron. Then the infinite war has begun in truth. The battlefield drifted in silence. Sentinel's orbit was littered with wreckage. Alliance hulls cracked and burning, walking bastions darkened, carriers split open like carcasses, fighters drifting lifeless through the void. The golden lattice of the planet's shields still shimmered, but faintly, dimmed from the strain of holding against lances that had carried the weight of stars. The Razee II moved slowly through the graveyard, her broadside guns cooling, her hangars filled with battered survivors. Medics worked in shifts without rest. moving from shuttle to shuttle, pulling men and women from wreckage, sealing wounds that never should have been survived. General Tudor's Marines stood in silence at the hangar bays, rifles at their sides, heads bowed as row after row of bodies were laid out in ordered lines. It had been victory, but only barely. The Alliance Council convened aboard Sentinel's golden towers, their banners heavy with loss. Tartans roared their grief, demanding vengeance, pounding fists until the chamber shook. Sovereign voices hissed low and sharp, mourning the fleets torn apart even as they called for more. Cryion sat silent, but their eyes were stone, their silence the weight of mountains mourning in stillness. The Illyrians did not roar. They did not hiss. They stood in calm, their silver eyes dim, their voices even. But when they spoke, silence fell across the chamber. You do not yet understand why Sunfire was built. The words carried like a blade. Banners turned, fury dimming, grief pausing in confusion. River's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he studied the Illyrians. They bowed their heads slightly, their voices soft but sharp. Sunfire is not only a haven. It is not simply a sanctuary to carry survivors if the infinite sweep the stars. It was designed to draw them, to lure them, to distract their gaze when the cost of battle becomes too high. The chamber stilled. The Illyrians continued, silver eyes unblinking. The Watchers will not ignore Sunfire. They will see it. They will sense it. They will fear what it represents. And they will come for it. If the Alliance cannot hold against the infinite, if the fleets break, if Sentinel falls, if Shadow fails, then Sunfire will move. It will cloak itself, flee into the void and carry life with it. It will be the fire that outlasts the shadows even if all else is erased. The words hit like a silence heavier than grief. Tartans roared in anger, calling it cowardice, demanding every resource go to Shadow, not a haven. Sovereign hissed their fury, warning that no predator could be tricked with flight. Cryion remained silent still, but their stone eyes burned with something colder. Not rejection, but calculation. And through it all, Buck Rivers stood unmoving. His voice when it came was low and iron. We will fight. Shadow will be built. The fleets will endure. But Sunfire will rise too. And if the infinite come for it, then it will not be fear that draws them. It will be their mistake. Stephen's pale eyes glowed faint at his side. His whisper cut through the silence. And if we fail, it will be all that's left. The galaxy shuddered. What had begun at Oralis and raged at Sentinel spread like fire across the stars. The infinite no longer lingered at the edges, no longer tested with silence or drifted as shadows. They moved in force, everywhere at once. The first strikes came at the rim. Small colonies, mining stations, trade hubs, each erased in moments. Obsidian silhouettes appeared without warning, violet arcs cutting through shields and hulls before defenses could raise alarms. Entire populations vanished in a breath, survivors pulled into shadow without trace. Then they came for the mid-rim. Systems that had pledged neutrality, worlds that had turned their eyes away from the Alliance and Federation alike, suddenly burned. 3 Watcher ships appeared over Astron Prime, tearing orbital rings apart in a single volley before turning their weapons on the surface. At Talos Gate, 6 shadows erased the defense fleet in silence and bent cities into rubble, leaving only smoking scars where millions had lived. And further still, they reached toward the core. The Watchers moved as no fleet ever had, as though fold space itself bent to their will. No warning, no pattern, no strategy the Alliance could predict. Only annihilation. Reports flooded into Bastion Dock. Fleets dispatched to one system found 3 more under siege before they arrived. Carriers sent to reinforce Tartus returned only to find Savern burning. Every time the Alliance moved to defend, the infinite had already struck elsewhere. In the war dome of the Razee II, Buck Rivers stood unmoving, the holographic star map glowing around him with red after red after red. Entire sectors blinked to ruin in hours. His officers stood silent, their hands moving across controls, their voices tight as they tracked the impossible. General Tudor broke the silence, his voice iron. They're bleeding us thin. The Illyrians agreed, their silver eyes dim. This is their way. Not to strike where we are strong, but to strike everywhere at once. To see if unity can hold. Tartans roared their fury, demanding the fleets scatter, each banner defending its own worlds. Sovereign hissed agreement, their serpentine voices warning that predators circled weakest prey first. But River's voice cut through the chamber. No. Every head turned. His jaw was stone, his eyes cold steel. That's what they want. They want us to scatter, to fracture, to be children again, crying out for our own worlds while the galaxy burns. He stepped forward, his voice steady and absolute. We will not break. Not now. Not ever. The fleets will hold together. We'll strike where we must, trap what we can, endure what we cannot. But we will not scatter. The council fell silent, his words iron-binding banners. Even Tartans lowered their fists, their roars muted to growls. Sovereign hissed but did not speak. Cryion gave a single nod. Stephen's whisper followed, faint but steady. They're learning. River's voice was low, almost a growl. Then so will we. The void above Eridan's reach shimmered with silence. The Gemini fleet drifted cloaked, their hulls bent against starlight, their engines cold. Titans held in perfect formation, destroyers fanned wide, carriers quiet, fighters locked in bays. At their heart, the Razee II loomed in silence, her cannons ready, her decks alive with preparation. They were bait. Across the system's edge, the Watchers appeared. A fleet of obsidian silhouettes drifted in, their violet arcs shimmering faint across the dark. 20 ships in all, massive as moons, their presence pressing against every mind in the fleet. The trap was sprung. The halo net ignited, golden walls flaring around the infinite ships. In an instant, half the Watcher fleet was caged, their lances striking against barriers that bent fire and hurled it back. The Gemini fleet surged forward, weapons unleashing in a storm. Titans roared with broadside fire, destroyers cut through arcs, fighters screamed from bays in clouds of burning light. The Shepherd's resonance cannons cracked one Watcher ship apart in blue-white fire. The Aegis II's golden shields bent lances until the Infinite's beams ripped through their own allies. The Isabella II shimmered through cloak, striking engines before fading again. The battle was fire and fury, but it was the Marines who shifted its course. General Tudor led the strike. Shuttles cloaked in resonance fields cut through the storm, slipping beneath the flaring arcs of infinite fire. They latched against the hull of one of the smaller Watcher ships, vast even at half the Razee II size, and Marines stormed inside. The hulls of the ship were black and alien, surfaces bending light, arcs of violet energy pulsing through every wall. The air was heavy, pressing against lungs, filling ears with whispers of silence. Tudor's voice cut through calms, sharp and iron. Resonance rifles blazed. Cloaked Marines tore through defenses that were more shadow than substance, cutting their way toward the core. The Watchers resisted, shadows shifting across corridors, arcs crackling, but for the first time the Infinite bled. They reached the engine. At the center of the vessel, a core pulsed, violet light folding space in pulses, disappearing and reappearing in fractions, blinking faster than thought. The source of their impossible movement. The Marines placed charges not to destroy but to sever. Minutes later, the ship fell silent. Its core dimmed. Its hull staggered. And for the first time in the Infinite War, a Watcher ship was captured. Dragged back behind the halo net, stripped of shadow, the vessel was laid bare before Alliance engineers. Illyrians led the study, their silver eyes wide with awe, their voices trembling with revelation. The drive was unlike fold space. It did not stretch space, did not tear through. It bent. It blinked. It vanished from one place and reappeared in another, in chosen coordinates, in fractions of time. A jump. The first true jump drive. River stood in the war dome as reports streamed in, his jaw set, his voice steady. We'll make it ours. The council listened as Illyrians promised they could replicate it. Cryion vowed to forge it into steel. Tartans roared for its weapons to be mounted. Sovereign hissed in triumph. Stephen whispered faint at his side, pale eyes glowing. They'll know we took it. They'll come harder now. River's gaze was iron, unflinching. Then let them. The captured Watcher vessel drifted in the docks above Sentinel, its obsidian hull scarred and broken, its core silenced. Alliance engineers swarmed it like ants on a fallen god, stripping plates, dissecting conduits, mapping runes that bent light into impossible angles. Illyrian scholars spoke in hushed tones. Cryion artisans hammered resonance alloy into counterframes. Savran hissed as they sharpened their findings into weapons. At the heart of it, the core pulsed faintly, fractured but alive. The jump drive. The first to wield it would not be Shadow or Sunfire. Not yet. Not the Razee II, nor the Shepherd, nor even a Titan. The Illyrians argued it must be tested small first. A destroyer stripped bare, fitted with the core in secret. They chose the stalwart, an earth-built vessel hardened and plain, her crew sworn to silence. Marines guarded the dock, resonance rifles at the ready, orders absolute. No one entered who was not trusted, no one left who had seen too much. General Tudor himself walked the decks before the test, his voice iron, his eyes sharp. This was more than trial. It was the birth of something that could turn the Infinite's own power against them. Buck Rivers watched from the war dome of the Razee II as the stalwart eased into the void. Her hull gleamed faint under Sentinel's light, her engines flaring low. The captured core pulsed faint arcs across her spine, folding light in ripples. The order was given. Engage. The stalwart vanished. Not into fold space. Not into warp. He simply ceased to exist. The chamber held its breath. Seconds stretched. Then the void bent, and she reappeared 100,000 kilometers away, shields shimmering, hull intact. Alive. Cheers erupted across the comms, Tartans roaring, Savran hissing approval, Cryion nodding in silence. The Illyrians bowed their heads, silver eyes dim with wonder. For the first time, the Alliance had matched the Infinite in their most sacred advantage. The jump drive was theirs. But triumph carried cost. Stephen sat pale in his chair aboard the Razee II, his voice faint, his eyes glowing with warning. They felt it. Every time we move this way, they will feel it. The Watchers will know. The chamber stilled. Rivers' voice was iron, steady and low. Then we'll make sure when they come we're ready. His gaze turned to Shadow, still incomplete but rising, her colossal frame black and gold against the void. And we'll strike them harder than they ever expect. 2 months passed. 2 months of silence across the stars, broken only by whispers of fear and the endless hum of forges. The Watchers did not strike. They did not test. They did not appear at the edges of systems. The galaxy waited in dread, certain every sunrise would be its last. And in that time the Alliance prepared. The Gemini fleet became the blade. Every ship, from the Razee II to the smallest destroyer, was fitted with a jump drive. The engineers worked day and night, Cryion hammers ringing, Illyrian scholars whispering, Savran claws and Tartan roars driving them forward. The first fleet of the galaxy capable of disappearing and reappearing at will was born. Gemini was no longer a fleet. It was a storm. And it waited above Tartus. Tartus was not the same world it had been. Once a proud warrior planet, its people roared with strength but its skies had been bare. Now its surface bristled with weapons. Planetary cannons the size of towers lined its ridges, plasma lances gleamed across its oceans, missile silos buried beneath its mountains waited in silence. Cloaked platforms drifted above the planet, shimmering into invisibility as they aligned their guns outward. The halo net stretched across the system unseen waiting. And above it all, the walking bastions loomed like gods, their shields layered, their weapons primed. Tartus was no longer prey. It was the trap. Buck Rivers stood in the war dome of the Razee II, the Gemini fleet arrayed in perfect silence around him. The Aegis II shimmered beside her, golden shields glowing faint arcs. The Shepherd pulsed with resonance cannons ready to split the void. The Isabella II flickered half-cloaked, her outline ghosting across the dark. Titans and carriers spread in arcs, destroyers and frigates poised for the strike to come. The alarms flared. They're here. The void bent and the Watchers arrived. Dozens of obsidian silhouettes appeared above Tartus, their violet arcs shimmering faint. They expected a world unready, another Oralis, another conquest to erase without effort. Their lances fired before their presence was even announced, violet beams cutting toward the surface. But the world did not burn. The halo net flared to life, golden arcs bending their fire into nothingness. Planetary cannons roared back in answer, their beams cutting through the void and striking the Infinite in their flanks. Cloaked platforms shimmered alive, missiles streaking out in swarms that cracked against obsidian hulls. And then the Gemini fleet moved. They jumped. In an instant, the Alliance storm vanished from its line and reappeared within the Watcher formation, weapons blazing. The Razee II unleashed her broadside, her cannons splitting two shadows apart in a single volley. The Aegis II's shields flared wide, reflecting fire into the Infinite's own hulls. The Shepherd pulsed arcs that shattered a ship into burning shards. The Isabella II flickered, striking engines before fading again. Titans split the dark with volleys. Carriers poured fighters into the void. Marines prepared for boarding even as Watcher beams split the skies. The battle for Tartus had begun. The void above Tartus burned. Watcher beams poured down like rain, violet lances hammering against golden arcs of the halo net. The sky lit in storms as the net absorbed, bent, and hurled energy back toward the invaders. Planetary cannons roared upward, their barrels glowing white-hot, each shot cutting through the dark to strike obsidian hulls. Cloaked platforms shimmered alive, vanishing after every volley, their missiles slicing like knives into the Infinite's flanks. And through it all, the Gemini fleet moved like a storm. The Razee II jumped again, vanishing in a ripple of light and reappearing at the edge of a Watcher formation, her broadside thundering into frozen arcs. Entire sections of obsidian hull shattered into glowing fragments, scattering across the void like meteors. The Aegis II pulsed golden shields wide, bending beams until Watcher fire curved back and gutted their own ships. The Shepherds split lances of blue-white resonance across the field, tearing through silhouettes that had never known defeat. The Isabella II ghosted in and out of cloak, her missiles cracking cores before vanishing into shimmer. For the first time, the Infinite bled above a world that fought back. On the surface, Tartans roared. Every warrior carried rifles forged in Sentinel's forges. Every city bristled with new weapons. Families had been trained to fight, shelters turned into strongpoints, mines converted into arsenals. When a Watcher lance broke through the halo net to tear into a fortress ridge, it revealed not ruin but fire, plasma lances and missile barrages erupting from the mountain itself, shredding the shadows that thought to erase it. The Tartan warchief's voice thundered across comms, his words half roar, half prayer. Tartus does not kneel. And his people answered, their voices a storm. Above, the Infinite pressed harder. Dozens of ships still drifted into orbit, violet arcs bending against Alliance shields. Watcher weapons cracked against the halo net until sections flickered, fading under strain. A Bastion station shuddered, its shields splintering before it surged back alive, weapons blazing. A Titan exploded in a flash, thousands of crew lost, their sacrifice burning brighter than their guns. The Watchers did not retreat. They had come to break Tartus. But the Gemini fleet refused to yield. Buck Rivers stood in the war dome of the Razee II, his voice low, his orders steady, his gaze cold steel. Jump. And the fleet vanished, reappearing behind the Infinite Armada. Weapons thundered. Titans cut flanks apart. Fighters screamed through gaps, weaving plasma trails that split ships into fragments. The Shepherd's resonance cracked through 3 silhouettes at once, their cores splintering in showers of molten fire. Stephen stood at his side, his pale eyes glowing faint. His voice trembled but did not falter. They're not just testing us anymore. They're trying to break us. Rivers' jaw tightened, his voice iron. Then they'll find Tartus unbroken. The battle raged on, fire against shadow, golden arcs against violet lances. And for the first time in the Infinite War, the Watchers realized they had not struck prey. They had struck a fortress. The battle raged for hours. Watcher beams hammered the halo net until sections flickered, shields bending under the weight of stars. Golden arcs wavered, but they did not break. Planetary cannons thundered upward in answer, plasma lances cutting through the dark, missile silos firing until their mountains bled fire. Cloaked platforms danced in and out of shimmer, every strike crippling another Infinite silhouette. The Gemini fleet moved like lightning, jumping and reappearing within the storm. The Razee II thundered broadsides, splitting ships into molten ruin. The Aegis II bent violet beams back against their senders, golden shields blazing like suns. The Shepherd's resonance arcs cracked obsidian hulls apart, blue-white fire splitting cores that had never been touched. The Isabella II ghosted, flickering in and out, a phantom that left destruction in her wake. But victory carried blood. A Titan collapsed into fire, her crew vanishing in brilliance. A walking bastion shuddered as its shields fell, burning under violet lances until its core tore apart in a silent scream. Hundreds of fighters never returned, their trails ending in void. The skies above Tartus glowed with wreckage, the voids scarred with debris. And still the Tartans roared. Every lance that struck their world was answered by fire. Every city scarred erupted in counter-barrages. Families pulled rifles from walls and fought in streets when shards of shadow landed. Entire villages bled, but none broke. The warchief's voice thundered across comms as the Watcher fleet finally faltered. Tartus stands. Tartus fights. Tartus endures. And the shadows withdrew. Silence fell. The Infinite retreated into the dark, their ships vanishing in arcs of violet shimmer, their lances fading until only wreckage and fire remained. Tartus was scarred, oceans boiled, cities cracked, ridges burned, but alive. The Alliance had held. 3 days later, the Alliance Council gathered. Holograms of Tartus burned in the chamber. Scars across oceans, cities reduced to rubble, bastions shattered, fleets broken. But the planet lived, and its people roared louder than ever. Tartans demanded vengeance, fists slamming alloy tables until the chamber shook. Strike them. Hunt them. Burn them in their shadows. Savran hissed sharp agreement, their serpentine voices heavy with fury. Cryion gave no roar, no hiss. Only silence, their stone eyes burning with quiet resolve. The Illyrians spoke softly, their silver voices steady. They did not strike Tartus to destroy it. The chamber stilled. They struck to test. To see if we would scatter, if Tartus would break. To see if unity was truth or a mask. Buck Rivers stood at the center, his arms folded, his gaze iron. And we showed them. His voice cut through banners, sharp and absolute. Tartus burned, but it endured. The Gemini fleet bled, but it stood. The Alliance did not scatter, did not fracture. They wanted weakness. They found strength. Stephen whispered at his side, his pale eyes glowing faintly. And they'll come harder now. Rivers did not flinch. Then we'll be harder still. The chamber above Illyria's silver spires glowed with soft light. It was not the war dome of the Razee II nor the golden towers of Sentinel, but the quiet heart of the Illyrian archives. A place older than memory, where silver runes lined endless walls and knowledge was etched into crystal that pulsed faint with life. The Alliance Council gathered here, banners heavy with Tartus scars, fleets still mending, marines still counting their dead. They had fought the Infinite. They had survived. But survival was not enough. They needed to understand. The Illyrians had called them here to tell the truth. Silver-eyed scholars stood at the center of the chamber, their robes gleaming faint in the soft light. They bowed their heads in silence before speaking, their voices calm but heavy with centuries. You believe the Watchers are remnants, fragments of those who came before, shadows left behind to clean the galaxy of what rises too far. The council nodded. It is not so. The chamber stilled. The Illyrians raised their hands and the runes across the chamber glowed. Holograms unfolded, not of stars or fleets, but of history, ancient, raw, jagged with loss. The caretakers who once walked the galaxy did not fall. They did not vanish. They did not die. They chose. The runes shifted, showing vast cities, towers of light that stretched across stars. Civilizations that had reached beyond galaxies, their knowledge infinite, their power unmatched. And then fire. Collapse. Wars of pride and ambition that split empires, consumed worlds, shattered suns. The caretakers saw their mistake. They saw themselves in every rising species. The same ambition, the same hunger, the same steps toward ruin. And so they chose annihilation. The runes shifted again, showing ships vast as moons, obsidian silhouettes glowing violet. Not remnants. Not fragments. Transformed. The caretakers had remade themselves into shadows, into watchers, into the infinite. Not guardians. Executioners. They became the end. The banners roared. Tartans thundered their rage, fists slamming alloy tables. Cowards. Betrayers. Gods turned to butchers. Savran hissed fury, their serpentine voices burning. Cryion remained stone, but their silence was heavy as mountains breaking. The Illyrians lowered their heads, their silver voices soft. They do not test us for weakness alone. They test us for reflection. They look for themselves. They look for their own sins. If they find them, they will erase us. The chamber burned with silence. Buck Rivers stood at the center, his gaze cold steel, his voice iron. Then we'll show them something they've never seen. His eyes cut across banners, his voice rising. Unity. Strength. A will not to conquer but to endure. We'll show them we are not their reflection. We'll show them we are something new. Stephen's pale eyes glowed faintly at his side, his whisper sharp as a blade. And if they refuse to see? Rivers' jaw tightened. Then we'll show them how even gods can bleed. Cryon's skies glowed red with dawn when the shadows fell. Obsidian silhouettes appeared above the stone world, vast as moons, their violet arcs bending across the void. This time there was no silence, no hesitation, no testing strike. They came in force. 30 Watcher ships, their weapons pulsing with energy so vast that even Sentinel's archives had whispered only in fear. Planetcrackers, their lances bent downward, not toward fleets, not toward stations, but toward Cryon's surface. To split mountains, to boil oceans, to crack the planet itself into ruin. But Buck Rivers had been waiting. The Gemini fleet was already there, cloaked in arcs above Cryion. Titans aligned in silence, carriers brimmed with fighters, destroyers fanned in webs, the Razee II at their heart, her guns primed. The Aegis II shimmered, shields ready, the Shepherd's resonance cannons pulsed with fire, the Isabella II flickered half-cloaked. And beyond them, hidden in shimmer, 6 walking bastions loomed like gods. They had been moved in secret, cloaked in resonance, hidden in silence. Cryion had begged for guardians, and Rivers had given them more than they dreamed. Now as the first lances fell, they woke. Golden shields flared as the bastions decloaked, absorbing planet-cracking fire into walls of brilliance. Energy bent and rippled, pouring back into the void in arcs that cracked Watcher hulls. Their cannons roared in answer, entire broadsides firing at once, shaking the dark with fury. The Gemini fleet struck. The Razee II thundered forward, her broadside splitting the lead Watcher ship into molten ruin. Titans poured fire into the flanks. Carriers unleashed wings that swarmed the void. Destroyers cut through gaps in arcs of burning plasma. The Aegis II spread her shields wide, bending lances back until 2 infinite ships were gutted by their own weapons. The Shepherd cracked blue-white resonance through another, its core shattering like glass. The Isabella II flickered, slipping behind a ship, planting missiles into its engines before fading again. For the first time, the Watcher's planet crackers were stopped. But victory was blood. A bastion faltered, its shields overwhelmed, violet lances punching through until its core erupted in brilliance. A Titan collapsed in fire, her crew gone in silence. Fighters burned by the hundreds, their trails ending in sparks. And still the Cryion stood. Cities shattered under stray lances, mountains split, oceans boiled. But their people did not scatter. They marched into shelters, their stone-eyed leaders standing silent at the heart of the storm, unflinching even as their world cracked. The Watchers had come to erase. Cryion had come to endure. When the last shadow fell, the skies of Cryion glowed with fire and wreckage. 3 bastions stood dark, gutted, their hulks drifting. Half the fleet was scarred, thousands dead. Entire continents bore scars that would not fade. But the world lived. The Watchers had thrown their strongest weapon, and Cryion endured. In the war dome of the Razee II, Buck Rivers stood silent as reports streamed in, his jaw set, his voice iron. They'll come harder next time. Stephen's pale eyes glowed faintly, his whisper sharp. And we'll bleed harder still. But Cryion will remember this. The air of Cryion was heavy with ash. Buck Rivers walked the shattered streets, his boots crunching on stones split by fire. Towers once carved from mountains lay broken, their spires cracked and blackened. Oceans had boiled along the horizon, leaving steaming scars where water once surged. Entire villages had been erased, their rubble silent, their people buried beneath the weight of stone and flame. Cryon's people stood silent beside him, not weeping, not crying, not breaking. They bore the scars of their world in silence, their stone-eyed leaders bowing their heads, their children staring unflinching at the Admiral who had brought them salvation. One of the Cryion elders placed a hand of granite flesh on his shoulder, her voice low like rock shifting deep underground. We endured. Rivers gave a single nod. His jaw tightened, his eyes hard as iron. You did more than endure. You showed the infinite you cannot be broken. Hours later, the Alliance Council gathered. Banners burned with fury, grief, and fear. Tartans roared for vengeance, demanding fleets strike into the void. Savran hissed agreement, their serpentine voices sharp with rage. Cryion remained silent, their wounds heavy, their silence heavier still. The Illyrians spoke with calm steel, their silver eyes dim. Sunfire must be launched early. Fill it with millions. Send it into the dark before another Cryion is struck. Arguments thundered. Fists slammed alloy tables, hisses cut the air, silence weighed more than sound. Rivers listened. His arms folded, his gaze fixed on the holograms of the scarred Cryion surface. When he spoke, the chamber stilled. We'll fight. Shadow will rise. Sunfire will endure. But we will not scatter into fear. His orders followed, sharp and iron. The Gemini fleet will cloak. It will stay ready to jump. Savran will be our next defense. The council bowed, their banners lowered in assent. But the Infinite had other plans. The alarms flared across Bastion Dock. The Watchers appeared above Earth. Not a dozen. Not 30. Hundreds. An entire armada of obsidian silhouettes drifted into orbit, violet arcs pulsing faint as they aligned against the blue world below. They had not come for Savran. They had come for Shadow. The weapon still incomplete, still untested, still rising in silence, and yet powerful enough that the Infinite had felt its promise. The Watchers had come to erase it. On the Razee II, Buck Rivers' jaw tightened as the reports streamed in, his voice steady, unflinching. All fleets cloak. Stand ready. Jump on my mark. Stephen stood at his side, his pale eyes glowing faintly, his whisper trembling. They fear Shadow. Rivers' voice was iron. Then we'll show them they're right too. The Gemini fleet tore into existence above Earth in a blaze of light. Cloaked moments before, they jumped into a battlefield already aflame. The orbit of the blue world was a graveyard. Hundreds of Earth's ships drifted in ruin, their hulls cracked, their cores burning, their crews silent in the void. Yet even as wreckage filled the skies, survivors still fought. Frigates limped on battered engines, destroyers spat fire through broken guns, carriers launched fighters until their bays burned. They were dying, but they had not yielded. And at the heart of it, Shadow loomed. Incomplete but rising, her colossal frame bristled with half-finished guns and shimmering shields that flickered in test cycles. She stood vulnerable, a giant yet unborn. Violet arcs bent toward her, lances of annihilation meant to erase her before she could rise. Then Sunfire moved. The Ark's vast hull glowed as golden shields flared to life for the first time. Entire continents within its walls trembled as its core surged, dampeners pulsing, barriers layering one atop another. It drifted forward, placing its massive bulk between Shadow and the Infinite. A violet lance struck, carrying enough energy to split mountains. Sunfire's shields rippled, bent, and held. The blast dimmed, scattering across golden lattices until it was gone. Shadow lived. The Gemini fleet roared into the fray. The Razee II unleashed her broadside, cannons thundering into obsidian hulls, splitting a Watcher ship into burning fragments. The Aegis II flared her shields wide, bending violet lances until they gutted the shadows that had fired them. The Isabella II flickered into cloak, weaving between beams, her missiles striking cores before she shimmered away again. And the Shepherd surged forward. Her resonance cannons pulsed arcs of blue-white fire, tearing through 3 infinite ships at once. She split another with her prow, cutting into its hull before unleashing a volley that shattered it from within. Her guns roared until the void itself shook. Then the lances found her. Watcher beams converged, hammering her shields until they cracked, bending her armor until it glowed, splitting her spine until her cannons fell silent. The Shepherd erupted in fire, her resonance core collapsing into brilliance, her crew burning with her as she tore apart in a storm of molten shards. The Gemini fleet staggered, but it did not break. Earth's skies burned. Sunfire's shields flared again and again, bending lances away, holding Shadow behind its massive bulk. The Razee II thundered forward, her guns splitting shadows apart. The Aegis II bent arcs into fire. The Isabella II struck unseen. Titans and destroyers poured every weapon into the void. The Infinite pressed harder, violet beams hammering, shadows closing, but the Gemini fleet held. For every ship lost, another shadow fell. For every lance that struck, a shield bent and hurled it back. When the Watchers finally withdrew, the skies above Earth were scarred and burning, but shadow still lived. And the shepherd was gone. In the war dome of the Razee II, Buck Rivers stood silent, his jaw set, his gaze cold as he watched the wreckage drift. Stephen's pale eyes glowed faintly at his side, his voice a whisper. They fear shadow more than any fleet. Rivers' voice was iron, his words steady through the weight of loss. Then shadow will rise. For them and for the shepherd. The skies above Earth still smoldered when the council gathered. Wreckage drifted in orbit, the hulks of Earth's fleet burning silently in the void. Debris rained into the atmosphere, streaks of fire glowing across the night as families on the surface watched in silence. Hospitals overflowed. Dockyards worked without pause, pulling survivors from shattered hulls, welding steel into place before the wounds of battle had cooled. And in the war dome of the Razee II, Buck Rivers stood before the Alliance Council. The banners hung heavy with mourning. Tartans bowed their heads, their fists clenched, their roars muted. Savran hissed softly, their serpentine voices laced with grief. Cryion stood still as stone, their silence heavy as mountains breaking. The Illyrians spoke little, their silver eyes dim. All were united in sorrow. For the shepherd, the Warhammer-class vessel that had stood beside the Razee II since the war began, the blade that had split shadows in battle after battle, was gone. Her crew lost, her cannons silenced, her name carved into memory. Rivers' voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. The shepherd stood where others fell. She broke the infinite with her fire, and she will not be forgotten. The chamber bowed in silence, banners lowered in respect. For a moment war stilled. But war did not stop. Reports streamed in. Engineers laboring day and night, shipwrights working without pause. And for the first time since the war began, hope shimmered through the grief. Shadow would be complete in a month. Her weapons armed, her shields layered, her jump core humming with fire stolen from the infinite themselves. She would rise not just as a ship, but as the blade of the Alliance, the vessel the Watchers already feared. And Sunfire would be ready alongside her. Its shields sealed, its dampeners tuned, its life support systems alive. Families already walked its biospheres, engineers tested its engines, its bulk ready to cloak and move into the void. The last hope of the Alliance, ready to endure if all else fell. On Sentinel, the Illyrian forges worked in silence on another project. The Scuda V, long since scarred and worn, had been taken into dock, but it would not be left to rust. Already its hull was stripped, its frame reforged, its core replaced. A new Warhammer-class vessel was being born, one that would take the shepherd's place. Earth would not be left without a hammer. The line would endure. Buck Rivers stood at the heart of it all, his gaze hard as steel, his voice iron. We mourn. We rebuild. And we rise. Stephen's pale eyes glowed faint at his side, his whisper soft, almost fragile. They'll come again. Rivers' jaw tightened. Then we'll be ready. The Alliance Council convened aboard Sentinel, banners heavy with loss, but eyes fixed on the horizon. Shadow and Sunfire stood at the heart of their debate. The Tartans roared for offense. Shadow must strike first. Take her into the dark, find the infinite where they hide, bleed them before they can bleed us again. Savran hissed in agreement, their serpentine voices sharp. Predators hunt forward, never back. The Illyrians counseled patience. Shadow must guard the Alliance core. Sunfire must be hidden, cloaked, untouchable. If Shadow leaves us and falls and Sunfire is revealed, then all is lost. Cryion remained silent, their stone-eyed leaders weighing words like mountains. And Earth stood divided. General Tudor spoke for vengeance, his marines ready to board the infinite in their own shadows. Others warned of risk, that Shadow's fall would break the Alliance. Through it all, Buck Rivers listened. When the chamber fell silent, he stepped forward, his voice steady, his jaw set. Shadow will rise as the sword. She will strike when needed and she will defend when required. But she will not leave us blind. He turned, his gaze cutting across banners. Sunfire will be completed, but it will not scatter into the void. It will wait. It will cloak. It will endure. But it will not run. The council bowed their heads, some in assent, others in fury, but none in dissent. The Admiral's word was final. 3 weeks passed. Shipwrights labored without sleep. Engineers bent steel into fire. Marines trained in halls that echoed with the memory of the shepherd. Families filled Sunfire's biospheres, their children playing beneath false suns, their laughter a fragile echo against the silence of war. Shadow loomed vast and terrible, her hull sealed, her weapons primed, her core pulsing faint arcs of stolen infinite fire. Her decks buzzed with life, her crew sworn to secrecy and unity. She was nearly ready. And that was when the Watchers moved. They did not strike Savran, though scouts swore it would be next. They did not return to Cryion, though their wounds begged for vengeance. They appeared at the edge of Illyrian space. Dozens of ships, vast as moons, their violet arcs bending across the void, their silhouettes blotting out stars. Not drifting, not watching, advancing, toward Sunfire. Stephen's eyes glowed faint aboard the Razee II, his whisper trembling. They fear what it means. Buck River's jaw tightened, his voice iron. Then we'll show them what it means to fear us. The void above Yria trembled with shadow. Dozens of Watcher ships loomed vast as moons, their violet arcs flaring as they advanced. Their silhouettes pressed against starlight, their presence a weight on every crew, every mind, every soul in the system. And the Alliance met them. The Gemini fleet surged into position, weapons primed, jump drives humming with fire. The Razee II loomed at their heart, her hull gleaming with scars of countless battles, her broadside guns armed, her hangars alive with bombers. The Aegis II pulsed golden light across the void, her shields already flaring to absorb the first violet arcs. The Isabella II flickered half-cloaked, weaving between destroyers. Titans and carriers spread wide, fighters poured into space like swarms of fireflies. And at their head Shadow. Her hull was black and gold, her colossal frame gleaming as her shields pulsed in layers, one atop another. Her weapons, drawn from Sentinel's vaults and the Shield World's forges, thundered for the first time. A single volley split a Watcher ship in half, tearing its obsidian hull into molten ruin. The sword had been unsheathed. The battle ignited. Watcher lances hammered against the halo net, bent aside into golden arcs that burned their own allies. Violet beams split carriers apart, tore fighters into sparks, cracked titans until their cores glowed white-hot. The Razee II thundered forward, her broadsides gutting shadows in volleys, her bombers carving through weakened hulls. But fire struck back. Beams split across her flanks, armor buckling, shields failing, entire decks collapsing under impact. Her hull groaned, but she held, scarred but unbroken. The Aegis II spread her shields wide, bending lances back, protecting her sisters even as her golden light dimmed under the strain. The Isabella II slipped behind silhouettes, crippling their drives, vanishing before return fire could strike. Titans roared. Destroyers bled. Marines boarded where shadows broke. And still the Watchers pressed, endless, relentless, violet arcs hammering until the void burned brighter than stars. Then the surprise came. From the Shield World, ships surged into the system. 24 vessels forged in silence, long hidden beneath golden shields. They moved separately at first, firing their weapons in arcs that split infinite hulls, their shields bending lances as they pushed into formation. Then they began to align. Hulls shifted. Plates unfolded. Engines pulsed in resonance. In silence, the 24 ships joined, locking together in arcs of golden lattice until they were no longer many. They became one. A single vessel larger than anything the Alliance had ever seen save Sunfire, its shields shimmering unbreakable, its weapons firing in storms that tore through the infinite as though they were glass. The Unity. Its guns pulsed in arcs of brilliance, each volley splitting Watcher silhouettes into shards. Its shields bent beams until they shattered against themselves. The infinite faltered, their lines breaking under fire they had never known. The Alliance roared. The Razee II bled, her hull fractured, her decks burning. But she remained whole, her crew fighting, her guns blazing. Shadow's fire thundered, splitting the dark. The Unity ship surged forward, unbreakable, unstoppable. And at last the Infinite retreated. Their silhouettes faded into shadow, their violet arcs vanishing into the void. The battle was won. But the Razee II limped, her hull scarred, her frame broken. She would need to be docked for repairs, her strength reborn in steel and fire. Buck Rivers stood in her war dome, his gaze locked on the Unity ship drifting in brilliance, his voice iron. "We've shown them." Stephen's pale eyes glowed faintly, his whisper soft. "And they'll never forget." The chamber of the Alliance Council glowed with banners. The scars of Tartus still burned, Cryon's mountains still split, Earth still mourned the shepherd, and Illyria's skies still smoked from battle. The Razee II lay crippled in dock, her deck silent, her guns cooling, her frame split but unbroken. And yet for the first time the council stood not in grief nor in fear. They stood in triumph. Holograms filled the chamber. Shadow, vast and terrible, her hull gleaming black and gold, her weapons' thunder still echoing across systems. Sunfire, radiant, cloaked, vast enough to cradle worlds, her shields impenetrable, her engines ready to carry life into eternity. The Unity ship, larger than any warship save the Ark, unbreakable shields and unstoppable guns forged from the shield world's silence. And the Gemini fleet, battered but whole, their jump drives humming, their crews bloodied but unbroken. The Alliance had not scattered. The Alliance had not fallen. They had endured. The Tartans roared their triumph, fists slamming alloy tables, their voices thunder. "We bled but we did not break." Savran hissed sharp approval, their serpentine tones edged with fire. Predators met prey but found a wall of teeth. Cryion inclined their stone heads, their silence heavy, but their meaning unshakable. The Illyrians bowed, their silver eyes dim but brightening faintly. The Infinite struck to erase us. And we stood. Buck Rivers stepped forward. His uniform was scarred, his shoulders heavy, but his voice carried iron. "The Infinite War has only begun. They will strike again. They will test again. They will bleed us again. But for the first time we can meet them on equal ground." His gaze swept the chamber, his eyes locking on every banner in turn. Shadow stands. Sunfire endures. The Unity ship rises. The Gemini fleet holds. His voice sharpened, rising above banners, above scars, above silence. The Infinite are not gods. They are not fate. They are not the end. They can be fought. They can be beaten. The chamber erupted. Tartans roared, Savran hissed, Illyrians whispered, Cryion stood unmoving but firm. For the first time in history, the Alliance believed not just in survival, but in victory. In the silence after, Stephen's pale eyes glowed faint, his whisper soft enough only Rivers could hear. "And they'll never forgive us for it." Rivers' jaw tightened, his voice low but steady. "Then let them come." Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next with Buck Rivers and the Razee Saga.